Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Professor Dr. Joseph Romance will be talking about midterm elections and kind of what to expect for the upcoming election on November 4th. So I'll let him take over.
Thank you. Thank you for being here today. I conduct this like I do my classes, which means that I'm always welcoming questions as we go along. However, I think I've designed it in such a way that there's space at the end to ask questions. But that doesn't, if you don't understand something or want to make a comment during the presentation, I'll be happy to stop and talk about it. So, first of all, let me start with what are the midterm elections? That may be obvious, but we should be clear about that, what they are. Every 2 years, according to the Constitution, every single House seat must come up for election. So all 435 members of the House have to be re-elected, or, well, elected. 1/3 of the Senate comes up. The Senate terms are 6 years and they're staggered by 2 years each. So roughly 1/3 of the Senate comes up for re-election every 2 years. I say roughly because, well, first of all, we have 100 senators. You can't divide 100 by 3 to get an even number. Secondly, if a senator retires or dies, the governor will appoint a replacement. But even if there was 4 years left on the term, they'll hold an election at the next immediate time period, unless the senator dies very, very close to the election, something like that. And finally, there are state races, and most importantly, governor's races, and that varies. Some states hold their elections in these called midterm elections. Some happen during the presidential election. Most governors are only a few exceptions now. Years ago, there used to be a lot of two-term governorships, but most states, with just a couple exceptions, now have 4-year governorships. Right? So, that's what happens. That's what the midterm elections. Why are they important? Well, they're important for a number of reasons. One, obviously, they're most important for the change in power. Right? One party can gain power what did not have power before, or one party can maintain power. Obviously, the president's not up for re-election. I'll talk about him in a minute. But right now, the House is controlled by Republicans, and the Senate is controlled by Democrats. And you could have a shift there, either way. So that could change, of course. And that will change the tenor of the next 2 years. Secondly, why are they important? It kind of gives a midterm grade, if you will. I just gave a midterm grade. So students, this is kind of a midterm grade on the president, even though he's not up on the ballot. And since Obama's in his second term, he will never again be on the ballot. All right, it still gives him a midterm grade, and it gives Congress a midterm grade too, of course. But it gives the president a midterm grade. If the Democrats suffer significant losses, it is more likely that the president, as a Democrat, will probably have a less ambitious agenda in his last 2 years. If he suffers no losses, or just light losses, and I'll explain why it's likely for the Democrats to suffer losses anyways, then he would probably look more emboldened. All right? And of course, if the Democrats actually pick up seats, which is unlikely, and I'll explain why that is, then he would be very emboldened, probably. The third reason why it's important is that any midterm election provides an opportunity for certain candidates or certain office holders to prepare themselves for the next 2 years. Particularly, established candidates maybe position themselves for the next presidential run. And of course, this is going to be big not just with Republicans, but with Democrats. Why? Because Obama's not running in 2 years. He can't run. He's term limited. All presidents are term limited to 2 terms at most. And so what that means is that on both sides of the party, okay, both sides of the political spectrum, established people will use this to bolster their chances to get the nomination of the Democratic or Republican Party. Right? Now you might say, well, hold it. Hillary's not on the ballot anywhere. Isn't Hillary Clinton a major figure of the Democratic Party? She is. What's going to matter here is, I assume over the next couple of weeks, the final couple of weeks of the campaign, Hillary will be making speeches, probably campaigning for Democrats. If they win, It bolsters her. If they lose, it hurts her a little bit. She's the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party if she wants it, but it can help her a little bit. Very interesting case, like this establishing herself for the next time around. The Republicans is wide open. They haven't controlled the presidency since George Bush left. All right, they're interested. Obviously, they're obviously interested in getting power back in the presidency. But who's the nominee supposed to be in 2016? Well, we won't know that until 2016, but people are going to be jockeying now. Let's take one example. Scott Walker, the Republican governor of Wisconsin, has become something of a prominent figure in the Republican Party. He's also facing a tough re-election in Wisconsin. Okay? If he wins re-election, then it will strengthen him. All right? And he might very well consider a run for the presidency. If he loses, he's done. More than likely, his political career is over, at least in 2016, and probably forever. And what's interesting is, for a guy like Scott Walker, he could become the election is what day is it? November 4th or 5th? I think it's 4th. 4th. Yeah. November 5th, Scott Walker, he could have just two very diametrically opposed days. Not only just the loss itself, but he may very well think on November 5th that he could be the next president of the United States. And if he loses, he may well be thinking, well, I don't know if he has a law degree or not, but I have to find a new career for the rest of my life. He's not that old. Anyway. And then finally, this is related to the third point. So if the first point is Congress could change, the second point is a midterm grant of the president. The third point is people establish themselves for the next presidential run. The fourth point is new faces emerge. Okay. Barack Obama back in 2000, when he first won, he became, I think it was midterm election. I think he won the midterm election, and he became a prominent figure of the Democratic Party, and then eventually led the presidency. Right. By the way, related to those points, and I want to make this: Scott Walker's in a tough race. So if he wins, it'll be good for him. If he loses, that people expect it to be close, relatively close. It doesn't matter just whether a candidate wins or loses, but also how impressively they win, in some cases. Now, Scott Walker doesn't need to win impressively. He's in a tough race, so if he wins, it's great. But other candidates who are positioning themselves, all right, need to win impressively. For instance, I'll give you one example here. The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, is probably thinking about running for the presidency, particularly if Hillary doesn't run. If Hillary doesn't run, there's a whole slew of Democrats who are thinking about it. A lot of them may not run because they just think Hillary's got it. But here's my point about Cuomo. Any Democratic governor of New York could possibly be president of the United States. It's a big state, it's a New York state, it's a prominent state. Cuomo is not super popular. He's going to win. In fact, if he loses, it'll be a stunning upset. He's going to win. But in the primary itself, in the Democratic primary itself, he did rather unimpressively. And I suspect he's going to win, but instead of winning like 75% of the vote, which is what he wanted, he's going to win like 60 to 40 or something like that. And that's going to hurt him because people expect him to win by a lot. He should win by a lot, and he's not going to. Probably. All right, that's why these are important. Let me talk a little bit about what political science says about the elections in general. And then the fourth point I'll bring up is what about this election in particular? I said a few moments ago, am I allowed to wander around a little bit?
You wander to your heart's content.
Okay.
You'll just have to keep catching.
I said a few moments ago that President Obama and the Democrats could lose seats and still be happy. In fact, they're almost certainly going to lose seats. Why is that? Well, with relatively few exceptions, the party that controls the presidency loses seats. Okay? This just is a typical thing. Now, there are exceptions to that. There was an exception way back in 1934. There was an exception in 1962. There was an exception in 1998. And I believe there was an exception in, there was an exception in 2002. So that's 4 exceptions. But if you look at American history from, say, the 19th century on, excuse me, from the 1900s on, and that's got to include, well, roughly, what, 56 elections, something, 56 midterm elections, in 52 of them or something like that, the party that controls the presidency loses seats. So Barack Obama is not, and the Democrats in general, are not expecting to win seats. They want to minimize their losses. Now there's a bunch of theories about why that is the case, and I'll give you a couple of theories. Because it's a bit of a mystery. But part of the explanation is this. Okay, typically, when one party wins the presidency, there's what's called a surge. Thank you. There's an increase in the number of voters, and their party wins. In the next midterm election, all right, there's a decline in voting. By the way, turnout in the presidential election is typically between 55 and 60% of the vote. Turnout at the midterm elections is between 35 and 40. Right? So there's a decline in turnout in general, but more specifically, the party that won tends to see a drop off in the people who vote, their people. By the way, the logic behind this is, I think, is probably simply that anger motivates people in politics more than joy. Right? So if you won, you're kind of happy. You won the presidency. If you're Democrats, it's hard to get up. If you're Republicans, right, you're more likely to be really pissed off, and so you're more likely to get higher turnout among Republicans. Also, by the way, in general, Republicans have an advantage, it seems, in midterm elections anyways. There seems to be an advantage in the number of their groups that show up. Also, midterm elections, because there's that lower turnout, tends to attract, this actually ties to what I just raised, and maybe this will make it a little more clear. Midterm elections tend to attract just the base of the two parties. Okay? What we call the marginal voter, the guy who shows up just for the presidential election and is excited, right, is less inclined to show up during the midterm election, right? And think about it for a minute. What probably got the presidential candidate to win in the previous election was he won more of those marginal voters who are less likely to show up. So then you reduce just to the bases. And that's not totally true, right? I'm not saying it's just the base. Whether you only on the base, those strong Republicans and strong Democrats, they're more likely to show up, okay? They're more likely to vote in every election, right? But those marginal voters will pop up. They probably help the president win, whoever the president is, whether it's Bush or Obama. And now they've gone, many of them have gone home, all right? And they don't show up. And then connect that to what I said a few minutes ago, right? I just think, anger and upsetness tends to motivate voters more, okay? And also particularly motivates voters in the second midterm election of a two-term president. Why? Actually, I'll pause and ask, speculate why that's the case? Yeah.
I suppose in that case, the president's been the president for 6 years, so they are even more tired of who the...
And it's been a long time since they've been in power, so they're really motivated. And the party that's in control, some of their voters may think, well, we've been in control for a long time, everything's fine, So, yeah, and it's not whether the Democrats aren't motivated, it's that the Republicans are motivated more. By the way, 2006 was the second midterm election for Bush, and the Democrats made huge gains, took control of the House and the Senate, okay? So, that's something to think about. That's the general theory, okay? Now let me talk about, let me talk specifically about the lay of the land right now. Right? So Obama and the Democrats expect to lose seats. What is important is to know what to expect. Okay? So what about this election in particular? Obviously it's a midterm election. Obviously it's a second midterm election in an 8-year term for Obama. Okay? What to expect? Well, the House may change a bit, but few people expect the Democrats to take it over, and in fact at this point the Democrats expect to lose seats. Right? I believe the current makeup, I should have looked at this morning, but I think it's 200 Democrats and roughly 200, but there are a couple people who died, but there's always that, always happens. I think there are 234 Republicans or something like that. The House has 435 members. To get a majority, you need 218. There was some hope on the Democratic side, maybe 6 months ago, they might actually win seats and they might win the 18 seats. Although that was always a bit of a long shot. At this point, the latest feeling is that they're going to lose a few seats. They hope to minimize it just a few. The Republicans, at one point, were hoping to win a whole bunch of seats, drive the Democratic number down to like 170, or 175 or 180, something like that. At this point, most analysts, and we'll see obviously in a couple weeks, but most analysts think Republicans will pick up some seats and probably something in the 5 to 10 range. That will not change the House remarkably. It will put the Republicans in a slightly stronger position, right, but not massively so. And that's the expectation as of today. All right. That's the House. The Senate. The Senate is where the action is this year, because there's a very realistic chance that the Republicans can get control. And in fact, there are political scientists and journalists who have these models, and they plug in different variables, and each model is a little different. Sometimes they plug in how much the economy is growing. Maybe they plug in the president's approval rating. They add some other things, and different political scientists have different formulas. Most of these models, with one major exception, show that the odds are somewhere between, say, 50 and 70, somewhere between like 55 to 75% chance that the Republicans will gain control of the Senate. And let me explain what's going on here. As I said, a third of the Senate's up, and there are a couple people died or retired, so actually I believe, I did write this down actually. There are 36 seats up in the Senate this year. Okay. As I said, Republicans, and by the way, the current makeup of the Senate is 55 Democrats and 45 Republicans. Okay? Now that's, on the first glance, that sounds like, well, Democrats would have to lose 6 seats, by the way, to lose control of the Senate. By the way, anyone know why it's 6 seats? Why, if a 50-50 tie, the Democrats won't maintain control? Does anyone know why? Yeah.
The vice president cast the tie.
Vice president has almost no powers in our constitutional system. It's one of the wasted positions. But he has one power. Whenever he's in the Senate, he's the presiding officer. He cannot vote on anything but a tie vote. His only constitutional power, the only thing the vice president really can do, besides waiting for the president to die, is to cast a deciding vote in a tie. So if there are 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans at the end on November 5th, then Joe Biden will show up in the Senate and he will break all ties. And the most important vote that he has to show up for is actually the first vote in the Senate, all right, which organizes the Senate. And then they get to assign committees and everything, and they get to assign power. And he'll break that tie. He'll also show up if there are close votes, some policy, but the key first vote he'll show up for. And he'll break the tie, and he'll give Democrats control of the Chamber. So the Republicans need to pick up 6 seats. Now you might say, well, that sounds like a lot. And it is a lot, except to say there are a couple things going on here. There are 36 seats up this year. Right? 21 of them are defended by Democrats. 15 are defended by Republicans. So there's a gap there. If it was 18-18, we might not be talking so much about the possibility Republicans can gain control. But it's not just that, right? It's not just the fact that the Democrats have to defend more seats than the Republicans. Okay? It's that the seats they're defending the seats they're defending, in many cases, are seats that are in states that Mitt Romney won in 2012. And they're in seats of states that are largely becoming either Republican-leaning or Republican-dominated states. And I'll just name, that's not true of all 21. The Democrats are going to win a lot of seats to come up for re-election. But there's a lot of these marginal seats, and I'll just list 6 of them. Louisiana, South Dakota, West Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, Alaska.
And Kansas.
No, Kansas is controlled by Republicans. No, you're right. You're right. I'm just saying, Democrats are happy about that being in play. All right. I forgot to mention one other. Iowa.
I was thinking.
Iowa. Although Iowa is actually a sort of a swing state going
Yes,
either way.
we are.
So, but these 6 states, Louisiana, South Dakota, West Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Alaska, all those states went for Romney in 2012. And they went by, most of those, with the exception of North Carolina, yes, with the exception of North Carolina, went to Romney by a lot. And then if you add in Iowa, which is more of a swing state leaning Democrats, but there's a very close race. There's 7 races now in which Democrats are defending seats, and they're in a tough spot. Okay? There's also, by the way, Colorado, which is another kind of swing state. I'll talk about the states which Republicans are defending in a minute. Right? But you see, so the lay of the land is very, very tough for Democrats. They're defending more seats, and they're defending them in political territory, where they're on the defensive. And so they very well could lose a lot of seats. And that would explain why they might lose control of the Senate. Yes?
Does it matter, though, that Romney was perhaps a little bit more mainstream, moderate, middle of the road in terms of the defense? Or?
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, that's true. Romney was less conservative than many. But still, these states that I just mentioned, not Iowa and Colorado, but these 6 states I just mentioned, are very conservative states. And are getting more conservative over the years, right? With the exception of North Carolina. which still is a kind of a swing state that sort of leans Republican. And Iowa and Colorado are swing states that lean Democratic. Right? So it's tough. So that's why most models show that the Republicans are probably going to pick up anywhere, maybe as little as, most people think they're going to pick up at the least 5 and as many as 8. And of course, 6, 7, and 8, if they pick up 6, 7, or 8, they will gain control of the Senate. Right. Now, that's the lay of the land. Let me talk what to expect. All right. Again, I'll focus on the Senate. Okay. What to expect? Well, one thing to expect is that the focus, if you watch the election coverage, election night, of course they'll talk about governors, and we have a governor's race here. It's very interesting in Kansas, and I'll talk about that. I'll be happy to talk about that if you want to. But the main focus is going to be on the Senate, because that's where the real interesting change could happen. You know, like I said a second ago, the House, they don't expect it to change. The Senate could change. And so you're going to see all night long the focus on if it could change, how many seats the Republicans are picking up. And I said a second ago, by the way, to come back to my list here. All right, I listed 6 states that Romney took that that Romney took that the Democrats were defending as Senate seats: Louisiana, South Dakota, West Virginia, North Carolina, Arkansas, and Alaska. Well, West Virginia, the Democrats have almost written off all of it, so there's one loss. I believe Montana is another state, which I didn't mention here. They've written that off. Okay. Up until a few days ago, they'd written off South Dakota, but something changed. Okay. And of course, so they're already conceding 2 or 3 losses. But if on election night the Democrats lose 3 seats, Obama's going to celebrate. The Democrats are going to celebrate. Right? They're going to be deliriously happy. But they'll be pretty happy if they just maintain control of the Senate. But if they only lose 2 or 3, they're going to declare it a win. Okay. Okay. But let's talk more about what's going on in this particular election. All right. What to look for? Well, again, I would recommend that you look at the following states. All right. And I'll talk about them in some depth for a little bit. And I'll just go across the country. Georgia, which I haven't mentioned yet. Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, which I have not talked about yet, Louisiana, Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Colorado, and Alaska. There are 9 states to look for. Now, of those 9 states, with the exception of Georgia, Kansas, did I mention Kansas in that list? Okay. Georgia, Kansas, and Kentucky are actually controlled by Republicans. So those are your 9 competitive races. Right? And I was looking at poll numbers just this morning or yesterday, and all those races are kind of close, reasonably close. Okay. Well, I'll talk about some depth in a second. But 6 of them are controlled by Democrats, 3 are controlled by Republicans. What would help the Democrats from a Democratic perspective is to take off one of those or 2 of those, or all 3 if they really get lucky from a Democratic perspective, is to take off the Georgia seat, the Kentucky seat, and the Kansas seat. And we'll talk about Kansas in a minute because it's not actually a Democrat pickup no matter what. But I just saw a poll this morning that the Democratic candidate Nunn has for the first time in this election, has a lead in one poll. Now the race has been close throughout the fall, but now it's a woman. It's the daughter of the former Democratic senator from many years ago, Sam Nunn, his daughter. And I saw a poll this morning. I think she had a 2-point lead. Now that's within what we call the margin of error, and so it's very close. All right, that's something to think about. Kentucky, the minority leader, Mitch McConnell, who hopes to be the majority leader of the new Republican majority, if it happens, is in a tough race with Allison Grimes. Right? Although it's interesting, is the Democrats stopped putting money in Kentucky just this week. The National Democratic Party. Now Grimes raises her own money. What does that tell you? It tells you, by the way, that the Democratic Party, the National Party, thinks that they don't think they can win it. But up until a week ago, they thought they could. And actually, Grimes apparently, in some people's opinion, has made a little bit of a misstep in the debate she had with Mitch McConnell just a couple days ago. So she may have shot herself in the foot, in which case, and by the way, any kind of election like this is a battle of scarce resources. Democrats and Republicans have to decide where to put their money. Okay? And if you put it in one place, you can't put it in another place, right? So Democrats and Republicans are making tough choices about where they put resources. Right? So what's the lay of the land? Look at those 9 races. And on election night, I want you to, if you are paying attention, look at those 9 races. And if the Democrats do pick up a win in Georgia, turn a Republican seat Democratic, then they're in better shape election night. They still might lose it, but they're in better shape. And in fact, and Georgia's on the eastern part of the country, right? So Georgia results, if it's extremely close, we may not know for maybe until next day, right? But if Georgia goes for not Allison, that's Kentucky. If it goes to none, and we find that out relatively early in the evening, the Democrats are going to be pretty happy. What makes Georgia even more complicated, by the way, is Georgia has a special law. Georgia and Louisiana have the special laws where you have to have a runoff election if no one gets 50%. Okay? So what if, and there are some third and fourth candidates, and people also just write in things. What if none gets 49% of the vote, and her opponent gets 48% of the vote, and 3% vote? They have to have a runoff. And by the way, in Louisiana, which also has this rule, and the sitting senator is a Democrat, her name is Landrieu, first of all, she's behind the polls. She might eke out a majority, but they don't think she can get, a lot of people think that even if it goes to a runoff, she's not going to win. So she may even survive and get, the vote may be like, her opponent, the Republican may get like 45%, she may get 42%, and some other candidates might get, what is that math, like 13, 14%. She'll survive, but people don't think she can win the runoff at all. So whatever hope she has is try to get a 50% election win. Okay? So there's the Republican races. So I mentioned Louisiana. Arkansas is also a state head trending Republican, but it's Senator Pryor is a Democrat. And Alaska is also a very Republican state, which is got a Democratic senator, and he's also in a tough race. And he's behind the polls. So it looks good for the Republicans to gain control of the Senate. But what's interesting is I want to focus on, as I already mentioned, Georgia. I'll talk for a second about Kansas, and then I'll talk about South Dakota. Right? I already mentioned, as I said, Georgia. Sorry, what did I say? Well, Georgia I already mentioned. Right? Kansas. Kansas is very interesting, isn't it? The Democrats are not going to win that seat. In fact, they've taken their candidate off the ballot, and the court in Kansas have decided that it's all legal. So it's Pat Roberts versus Orman, and Orman's an independent. Well, Kansas could decide the fate of the Senate. What if the Republicans pick up 5 seats? The Democrats win 49 total. Some Democrats aren't up for re-election, right? So it's 50-49 after Election Day. What will Orman do? He's an independent, but he seems to have a past that would indicate he leans more to the Democratic Party. On the other hand, he has also said, and this is very confusing, he said he would caucus with whichever party was a majority. So if the Republicans pick up 6 seats, he'll caucus with them. If the Democrats only lose 4 seats, he'll caucus with them. What happens, though, if it's 50-49 and he's actually deciding one? He hasn't really said what he'd do. I don't think he said what he would do in that situation, right? Because he said he'd caucus a majority. If the Republicans are 50-49, but his vote would actually, in effect, make the Democrats a majority. Very interesting, right? And so Kansas could decide this. Actually, let me go back to Georgia. By the way, something else could happen, by the way. It's very fascinating. I said in Georgia and Louisiana, but let's focus on Georgia for a minute. Let's suppose Senator Nunn, possibly Senator Nunn, gets 49% of the vote. Her opponent gets 48% of the vote. They go to a runoff. Well, what if it's 50 Republicans and 49 Democrats on November 5th? That's the result we know of in the morning of November 5th. And we have to wait for the Georgia runoff vote, which is usually about a month later. Then you have, by the way, Armageddon, politically speaking, as every single Democrat and Republican strategist descends on Georgia for this runoff race. And they will pour millions of dollars into the runoff race for the Republicans to get that one more seat they need, for Democrats to just hold on. Right? The same thing could happen in Louisiana, too, although I think, as I said, most people think that Louisiana, unless Senator Landrieu can get the 50% of the vote on election night, it doesn't look likely, but if that's more possible, that's a better route for her than actually to survive a runoff. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? And of course, the other interesting is that things kind of change. Midterm elections attract less attention than the general election. Right? Turnout's going to be lower. I know in my classroom, students don't really want to talk about it that much. They don't seem to care that much. Right? A lot of them aren't going to vote even though they're eligible. I already told you, right, the turnout's going to be 35 to 40%. So what that means, by the way, is that things can change more radically in a midterm election. There are more surprises, right? There are more unknown variables, which can then throw the election result. So things to look for in the next couple weeks as we head to the final. If you're interested, I'll give you some pointers. If you are following politics and reading articles, look for headlines. Sort of look for polling headlines, right? If you're interested in the outcome. But the other thing to look for, by the way, is where are parties, national parties, pulling out, and where are they putting resources in? And I already mentioned one, right? The Democrats have decided that the National Democratic Party. By the way, the funding occurs at the state level. The candidates raise money, but also the National Party puts money in. Okay. The National Democratic Party has decided to pull its money from Kentucky. I already mentioned that, right? They've decided Grimes is going to get it. She's got to get it on her own. We've done our help. On the other hand, just this past week, some polls have come out indicating that South Dakota, which Democrats had conceded for months they were going to lose, a poll came out showing their candidate was only a couple percentage points behind the Republican. And then this guy, a former Republican senator, Larry Pressler, as running as an independent, and he's getting a lot of votes. Actually, he's in second place. But what would he do if he wins it, right? It's kind of the Ormond problem, right? Except he's a former Republican. And Pressler has said nice things about Obama, said he voted for him. On the other hand, he's conservative about fiscal matters. Who would he caucus with if he won, right? And then if his support fades, a lot of independent candidates' support fades, would those voters in South Dakota who were going to vote for Pressler have decided they're not going to vote for him, would they go back to the Republican candidate or would they go to the Democratic candidate? That's a kind of interesting question. See what I'm saying? And by the way, the Democrats, no, I'm sorry, not the Democrats, but a Democratic-leaning political action committee just dumped $1 million into South Dakota. Right? They think they can turn the tide. But I don't know if the Democratic Party itself has also decided this. Republicans had initially decided, a couple weeks ago, decided to stop, the National Republicans decided to stop funding South Dakota, not because they'd given up on it, they just thought, we've got it, why waste any resources? Right? Now, the Republican Party is pouring resources into Kansas, where they didn't think they'd have to spend a dime 6 months ago, or South Dakota, where they didn't think they had to spend a dime. Right? Republicans also pulled out of Michigan. Michigan initially was a competitive Senate seat. Now polls show that the Democrats opening up a little bit of a lead. Republicans have decided we're lost. We've lost as well. And these are kind of interesting things to look for. So that besides just polling, guys, the other thing you want to look for is, if you want to get a little bit in the weeds of things, look for headlines and articles where the parties are spending money. Now, they're not always right, but they've got experts who study these things and studies at a really deep level. Right? And if they decide to pour, the Democrats decide to pour money into South Dakota, it doesn't mean they're going to win it, but it means they think they've got a shot. Republicans decide to pull out of Michigan means they've conceded it. Now, I will tell you, over the years, I've seen races where the National Party's given up and the candidate still wins. Grimes may still win in Kentucky. Okay? I forget who the Republican candidate is in Michigan, but he may still win in Michigan.
Terry Lin.
Terry Lin, okay, yeah. But I mean, the odds are, it's tough.
Yeah, I just moved here from Michigan. She's a Secretary of State.
Yeah.
Gary Peters.
Yeah, I remember the name now. Yeah. My point is not that these things don't happen, but they are notable because they don't happen very often. Okay. So those are the kind of things to look for.
I have just
Yes.
a quick question on the models. You were talking about one model. If I understood it right, shows the Democrats retaining the Senate. What are the different factors that model takes into account?
Actually,
Why is it different?
the reason why it's different is that it doesn't take into account other factors. It actually is a simpler model. Let me explain a little about models. I already touched on it. Let me come back just a little bit. Most of the models take into account polling. And usually what they do is they'll weight polls depending on how good the poll is. Some polling firms have better reputations than others and have better track records than others. They also take into account, as new polls come in, they're weighted more than previous polls. Does that make sense? But here's other things that different formulas have. They might include latest economic data. They might include the president's approval rating. They might include the unemployment rate. These kind of things, right? Different. What political science looks for, these correlations, which they hope will explain why one party wins another. What's interesting, and so most of them have these complicated formulas, and they all disagree a little bit. And what it is that these guys and some women who look at these things go back and see, did previous elections correlate with the unemployment rate? But they want to add more variables the better, they think, right? Because it gives them a better sense of capturing more of what's going on. Sam Wang at Princeton has a very simple model, and it really is basically just polling. And he kind of removes from all the, he takes everything out except the polling, basically. And he may have like one variable in there. But he has a very simple model, and he just looks at polling. Now, I didn't look up this morning, but as of last week or so, his model is way out there because it's the only one that shows the Democrats winning. And I don't know about whether it's changed in the past couple of days, but like a couple of weeks ago, or maybe a week and a half ago, it was like 80% chance that Democrats retain control of the Senate. And it looks very weird. And it's weird because he actually has fewer variables, right? And he's either going to be very embarrassed or he's going to be on every single talk show on Wednesday morning. Okay?
Along with the Royals.
Actually, I'm a nose fan, so I know this gentleman's from Michigan. I'm from Maryland originally. So that's something to talk about and think about. A couple final points before I move on to my last point. Things also to look for besides what I told you about polling and where the parties are pulling out. There's something called GOTV, get out the vote. Both parties have elaborate efforts to get out the vote. Right? And what's interesting about that is, well, we'll know Wednesday morning which party was more successful at it. For many years, Republicans were better at the Democrats. The Democrats got better at it in 2006, 8, not really 10, but they were destined to lose 10 anyway, midterm, and 12. The past, basically, the Democrats have had a better, get out the vote system or organization than Republicans had the past few election cycles. Now, there's no guarantee. Like I said, no get out the vote program that either party had would have helped the Democrats overcome the terrible loss they took in 2010. The economy wasn't doing well. Obamacare was controversial. It just, get out the vote does not guarantee you a win. But what the get out the vote does, and that's just, it's what you think it is, right? It's knocking on doors. It's driving people to the poll. It's calling them. It's getting out the vote. Right? It's trying to contact people multiple times and get them to the polls. That can't overwhelm things if one party's way ahead. But it can't help in a close race. By the way, I was just reading an article this morning. In Colorado, the Democrat, Senator Udall, is down by 5 points in the last poll. Now, that's not terrible, but it's not good. But Democrats are fairly confident that they're still going to win that seat. That's something to look for also election night. They lose, it's probably a bad night for them. Why are they confident? Because they believe they have in Colorado, they have a really great get out the vote. They were losing in the polls, by the way, in 2010, which was a big Republican year, by the way. And they still won the Colorado Senate seat. Not the one up from now, because that's 4 years ago, but a different one. Both senators from Colorado are Democrats right now. All right? Why? Because they have what they think is a great get out the vote in Colorado. So if you have that, because by the way, polling is going to often ask all sorts of people, and a lot of those people who get polled don't vote. Right? And of course, all that matters is who votes election night, right? And they get a good get out the vote system, all right, is going to help them. On the other hand, Republicans have had a pretty bad one. In fact, Romney's get out the vote system had a whole elaborate computer system just crashed election night in 2012. I'm assuming, by the way, and I don't have any evidence of this, but that's just an assumption on my part, the Republicans have fixed the glitches. They're going to get a better one now. Whether it's better than the Democrats is one question, but it's going to be better than what they had. By the way, if it's not, then it really should be concerned for Republicans, because that's just that doesn't have to do with, getting out the vote has nothing to do with ideology, because it doesn't have anything to do with your message, because usually the people you're contacting you do want to contact marginal, independent swing voters, but the first thing you really want is to get your base out. So a lot of the get out the vote, not all of it, but a lot of it is really just contacting people who you know, if you can just get in the polls, will be on your side. The problem is not convincing to vote for your team, it's convincing to actually go to the polls. Okay? Now, if you have time, you start moving to getting those people who could go either way and try to convince them, right? But you're really trying to get at your base. Democrats think they have a better system, particularly in Colorado, but they think they have a better system overall. That may save them, although it's hard to say. Right? The other thing to look for, by the way, I just mentioned a few minutes ago, right, that in South Dakota, I don't know, I should have looked before this class, but this lecture, but I was in class. I meant to look up about South Dakota, but I do know for a fact that a big independent PAC, not associated, a liberal one, agrees with the Democrats, but is not part of the Democratic Party, dumped a whole bunch of money, $1 million, a lot of money in South Dakota, right? You should look for what these outside money people are doing. And Kansas is very important here, by the way. The Koch brothers are unbelievably rich, right? And where are they putting their money? They have a lot of money. Where are these independent groups deciding to put their money? Right? That doesn't guarantee victory. Because, by the way, some of these independent groups have a lot of money, but they use it very stupidly. Okay? They waste a lot of money. But sometimes, not all, sometimes they use it well. All right. My final point, and then I'll sort of take questions and everything, is, and we've had some, but I'll take a lot more, is how will this affect policy? Well, as I said at the beginning of this talk, if the Democrats are going to lose seats, right? But if they lose less seats than normal, than what we expect, they maintain control of the Senate, and they only lose a couple seats in the House, then it's probably going to embolden them. Barack Obama is more inclined to be more aggressive in favor of his policies. If the Senate switches control, then you're going to look for the Democrats to be very defensive. Both senators, both in the House and Senate, but also probably in the President. Barack Obama probably. You can't get much done now, anyways, right? Because you have to get any major policy change in the law requires both the House and Senate to pass the law, and we've had sort of gridlock really for 2 years. But what's interesting, if the Republicans control the Senate, then what can they do? Well, what they can do, of course, is they can pass lots of bills. Now, they're going to be vetoed by the president in many cases. And they're going to have to think very strategically, aren't they? All right? Because if some policies they want are popular, some policies they want are unpopular. All right? And that's true of both parties. I'm not trying to pick on Republicans here. It's true of the Democrats, too. What they really want to do, they're going to have an interesting thing. If they regain control of the Senate, their base is going to want them to do what? Pass lots of bills. Okay? Quickly. All right? And their base wants things. And their base is going to think, we won. We're on a roll. Let's pass some bills. Give me some laws. But if you're a strategist for the Republican Party, what are you thinking? Are you thinking you want to pass every single bill? What do you want to do? Yeah.
Get elected again.
Get elected again, of course. So what kind of bills do you want to pass? You want to pass bills that that you agree with and are popular. Force Obama to veto them to set up the Republican Party for more victories in 2016. Does that make sense? But your base is going to want everything. Bases always want everything. Right? So the base is going to say, we won. Vote down the minimum wage. Minimum wage is popular. Right? They want that issue to go away. Right? And by the way, guess what? After all this struggle, guess what? It's a complicated thing. I can't go into details of how this all works, but believe it or not, after years of controversy, Obamacare is now helping Democrats. Okay? So already some Republican senators who are not up for re-election are already saying what? I mean, Senator senator from Maine, the Republican from Maine, Susan Collins, I think, said, you know, we're not touching Obama. Well, no, we're going to change the things that are bad about it, but we're not going to repeal it. It's over. But to conservative Republicans, who are the ones that are going to show up on election day, and suppose they win a lot of Senate seats, they want Obamacare repealed. But already Obamacare has moved to being from a really strong negative to a slight positive for Democrats, and if the trend continues, and there's every reason to believe it will, by 2016, Republicans are not going to want to campaign on this. But their base hates it. So you see the ticklish situation Republican leaders are in? Because they got to give their base what they want. And this is true of both parties. The Democrats face the same thing when they're in control. So the base is going to want, hey, repeal. As Senator McConnell said in the debate with Allison, I keep saying Allison Grimes. Oh, yeah, it is Allison Grimes. Yes, Kentucky. Allison Grimes. We want to repeal root and branch. Tear it all up. Guess what, though? Obamacare is not called Obamacare in Kentucky. It's called Kentucky. KY Connect or something. And actually, the average Kentuckian doesn't think it's Obamacare, but it is. Don't tell them. All right? And it's very, very popular. Right? So McConnell has to say we repeal it because he has to say that to get his base out in Kentucky. But what's he going to do if he becomes a new majority leader? Of course, you know what? That's the tricky thing of having power, isn't it? You got to make the tough calls. I guess that's about it. I mean, I'm happy with about 10 minutes. I would love to take questions, either specific or broad ones. Doesn't really matter to me. Yes.
So I was thinking, there's currently 2 independents in the Senate who caucus
Correct.
with Democrats.
Angus King of Maine and Bernie Sanders of Vermont.
Now, if Orman wins in Kansas, then there's a slight possibility that Pressler wins in South Dakota.
We could have as many as 4.
Yeah, and I was wondering, everybody's talking about, is Orman going to caucus with the Democrats or the Republicans? What if the independents in the Senate decided to create their own caucus and have, like, then people would sort of have to go through them because neither party would have a majority.
Yeah, that's true. And by the way, well, let's look at this, by the way. Oh, let's suppose, for sake of argument, that Pressler wins, that Orman wins, so then you have 4. They could create their own caucus, although it's kind of be difficult. All right. First of all, push comes to shove, somebody has to vote the first day or the first couple of days, right, to organize the Senate. And that gives a lot of power because that controls who are the majority party, who gets to appoint the chairs of committees, things like that. Okay. So the guys, even if they create their own sort of independent caucus, they're going to have to all decide at one point, or they don't have to decide together, but they have to pitch their vote somewhere on that first vote, right? Now, you are right, though, subsequent policy issues could be debated. The problem with your scenario of saying these 4, they're not 4 moderates. Actually, 3 of them, well, Angus King, caucus of the Democrats, he leans left on social issues. He's very, very moderate on fiscal issues. Ormond is, well, we know Ormond. He sort of leans democratically. Bernie Sanders is a socialist. He caucuses with the Democrats, but he thinks they're not liberal enough, right? So he's not going to vote for anything conservative. In fact, he's always pushing the Democrats to vote for, more and more left-wing liberal ideas, right? And then Larry Pressler, as I said, has said nice things about Obama on certain issues. On certain social issues, he's kind of liberal, but on fiscal issues, he's actually pretty solidly conservative, right? So this caucus, as you want to call it, and I can imagine what you're saying happening, but this is not for moderates. Mm-hmm. Often we think of these independent candidates who win elections. We often think of independents as moderates. Bernie Sanders is the furthest left you get. You can get in the House, in the Senate. He was in the House before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking it'd be interesting from like a policy point of view.
Yeah, and then when policy issues come up,
Put all those together.
Yeah, and by the way, Angus King and Ormond and Pressler all would be interesting because they do. Bernie Sanders is a vote for the Democrats, right? And he just thinks they don't go far enough. In fact, sometimes he votes against things he doesn't like because they're not liberal enough. So the Democrats occasionally where not that he's going to vote with Republicans, is he'll vote for a more extreme version. The other 3 guys would be interesting in policy, and really kind of social policy, right, versus economic policy. Pressler definitely wants to balance the budget with, he's unlike the Republicans because he's willing to tolerate some taxes, but he wants any balance in the budget that he would engage in, balancing the budget kind of policy, would involve, unlike most Republicans, would involve some tax increases, but overwhelmingly spending cuts. Right? And Bernie Sanders would, if he had his way, would be all tax increases. And he would expand Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and everything. Okay. I will also say this, of those four guys, though, if they got in, Obamacare would be pretty safe. Right? Because I think all four of them would be on record, or I believe would be in favor of keeping it. Right? So that's one thing to think about. And of course, by the way, do you think Obama's going to sign a bill that gets rid of Obamacare? It's his signature accomplishment. Whatever you think about it, in his mind, it's his singular accomplishment. Right? He will veto whatever comes up from Obamacare. Unless it's a small change. He might support like the changing the tax structure on medical devices, something like that, maybe. Other questions or comments?
I have a comment. I
Sure.
don't know if you think this is a good source or not. I was just looking at the New York Times and the Upshot page that Morgan, I just sent you a link to it too, but it's really kind of interesting, and they do go into their polling system, Leo, and they talk about those different factors and what they measure and so forth. But they also have some really interesting visualizations. The top one being showing how since January, it's gone back and forth. Will the Senate most likely be Republican or Democratic controlled? It's just an interesting side, I thought.
Yeah. You should look for trends, by the way, in polling. And this is a little side note, just for all elections. Whenever you're looking at polls, I would suggest you look for two things. One, look to see if you can find out whether it's a Democratic or leaning polling. Now, the New York Times is a newspaper. The Washington Post is a newspaper. Those kind of polls are different. They're different. They may be the same methodology. But there are also these firms out there that poll just for Democrats, just for Republicans. And they almost inevitably show a bias toward their party. Okay? But polling is as much an art as it is a science. Because what do you have to know to do a good poll? You have to know what you think the makeup of the electorate is going to be. Because remember, a good poll is a representative sample, but not a representation of the nation. If 100% of Americans voted, let's suppose that did happen, theoretically it happened, right? Then what would I want when I polled people? I'd want 12% African Americans, I'd want 13% Hispanics, I'd want, 6% Asians, and the rest white Americans, right? I'd want 51% or 50.8 or 51% women. And, but is that the way it really happens? No, it doesn't, right? Just to give you one quick example, Hispanics vote in much lower numbers percentage-wise. African Americans used to, but actually they've now equal whites. As far as, not in total numbers, there are more whites than there are African Americans, but the turnout rate is now the same as it is for whites. But here's the interesting thing, let's look at that for a second, by the way. Why is the same as it is for whites? If you're polling, is it because African Americans over the many decades have now become, that they're going to vote like, not the same way as whites, but they're going to vote at the same rate as whites? Or did it get boosted up because there's an African American candidate? Why is that important? Because remember, 100% of people don't vote. So I got to guess, using the best evidence I have, make an educated guess at what I think the electorate's going to look like. In the year 2016, Barack Obama is not going to be on the ticket for the Democrats. And more than likely, things can change next year, but it looks like all the possible candidates, Hillary and all the other ones, are all white. Okay? Is black turnout going to go back below? Now, don't get me wrong, it's still going to be close. In fact, even before Barack Obama, it was getting closer and closer. But there was a little gap. And in fact, in some parts of the country, African Americans turned out in higher rates than whites. Okay, in the 2008 and 12 elections. Okay? If this is a phenomenon of just or partially Barack Obama, then we might see a decline. And then I got to know that from a pollster. And of course, I don't know. I got to make a guess. So when I do my survey, right, do I want to make sure that 13% blacks are roughly 12 or 13% of the population? Do I want my survey to be 12 or 13% African American? Do I want it to be 11%? And by this will all affect the outcome of my poll, right? And Hispanics have always been much lower, but they're gaining slowly. If we use the white vote as, say, the normal, and I don't mean it's like the normal right, that's just the normal, let's say, African Americans have caught up. Are they going to go back down? And I don't think a lot, but a little. It's possible. Hispanics are catching up, but how much? And if I get these numbers wrong, then my poll's going to be wrong. Right? And of course, it's not just race. What percentage of the electorate is Democrat and Republican? And by the way, I mean, I don't know if anybody's ever been surveyed, but the first questions usually are Democrat. Either the first or the last set of questions are demographic. Are you old enough to vote? Did you vote last time? Do you intend to vote this time? Those are the kind of questions you could ask. Then they say, would you please answer? Are you white, black, how old, Democrat, Republican, Independent, etc. And I need to get the right group. And there's always that's as much as an art as is a science.
Well, and you'd have to adjust your sampling numbers by demographics in
Right.
order to hit the target, whatever your target is.
Right, and remember, and the thing is, you know, if turnout was 100%, or if it was just close, if we had really, really high turnout, you could basically say, I want the representative sample to look like just the nation, right? But that's not the case. You want your representative sample to look like what the electorate looks like, and the electorate does not necessarily look like what the nation looks like. So that's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about in polls, so look to see whether there's a bias, right? And Democratic polls almost always show their candidate doing a little better. Not a lot if it's a good poll, and they still use reputable things, but they often assume there are more Democrats out there. And Republicans assume there's more Republicans out there. Like there was a poll, I was looking at a website this morning, there was a poll that had bad news for the Colorado Senate, it was down 5. Right? And it was actually from a Democratic-leaning poll, but when you look down deep into the data, they're kind of assuming what other pollsters are not assuming. They're assuming much lower number of Democrats will turn out. So their poll had a much lower, by almost like 6 or 7 points lower than other polls are assuming what the Democratic turnout is going to be. So their poll was only like 32% Democratic, and other polls are assuming like 38%. Hence, that would explain a great deal, probably all of the 5% loss. The other thing to look for, by the way, is numbers, by the way. I won't get into the statistical analysis here, and I'm not really super knowledgeable on this, but I can just tell you that if you see a poll, usually they'll list somewhere that they polled so many number of people. Every poll has a margin of error. If you get much below 500, the margin of error gets to be huge. Thus, it's a useless poll. If you see a poll with 450 people, it's worthless. Because your margin of error is the margin of error gives you a range of possibilities. And think about it for a second. If your margin of error is plus or minus 10, you don't know anything. If I'm polling 45 and you're polling 35, I got a big lead, but we've only polled 350 people and the margin of error is 12 points. Her true number is really anywhere from 47 to 23. My true number is anywhere from, since 45, it's 57 to 33. It's useless.
Isn't 4% normally what the networks are?
They look around 4%, and they usually poll like 800 or 900 people. If you start polling above 1,000, you might get down to 3. There's some statistical stuff that I'm not conversant in. And if you poll like 2,500 people, your margin error drops down to like 2%, which would be a really good poll, but it gets more expensive to interview other people. Oh, by the way, and go back to representative samples. If any of you guys look at any website or any of those shows that allow call-ins, do you support this? They are beyond useless. They're just stupid, right? Because there's not a representative sample, and you can usually call them multiple times. And by the way, viewers of Fox are conservative on the whole, right? And they do call-in things, and of course they always show the Republicans doing well, right? Because that's the audience of Fox, and MSNBC does the same thing, which is more liberal-leaning, right? And they do a call-in. So don't trust any call-in. That's not even a poll. That's just stupidness. Like, when it comes to politics, I mean, if you want to do it, that's fine. I think we're about up, right? Well, it's a real pleasure talking to you all, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Romance.